Yesterday marked the clearest and most convincing sign yet that Joe Biden will not be the Democratic Party's nominee for president this year. And that doesn't mean that it definitely won't happen. Nobody can predict the future, but it does mean that nobody with any power in Washington wants Biden to run for office again. That much is very, very clear. The day began with a report prepared by Joe Biden's own DOJ that outlines Biden's mental decline in excruciating detail. And the top line conclusion, as you've probably seen by now, is that the commander-in-chief is so far gone, so detached from reality, so unaware of his own surroundings, that he can't even be charged with a crime. He's not legally responsible for his own conduct at this point. In interviews with the special counsel, Biden couldn't remember whether he was vice president in 2009. He couldn't pinpoint the date of his son Beau's death, even within a span of several years. Again, this is the conclusion of a special counsel working for Joe Biden's own Justice Department. Special counsel determined effectively that the president of the United States is too mentally incompetent to be held responsible for his own actions. So this is, to my knowledge anyway, the first time in American history when a president's own DOJ has declared him essentially unfit for office. And yet somehow that wasn't even the worst of the bad news for Joe Biden yesterday. You thought it couldn't, it can't possibly get worse than that. It's like something historically awful happening, which is being declared incompetent by your own DOJ. How could it get worse in the same day? But it did. Because on about 10 minutes' notice, the White House press office announced a press conference at 7:45 p.m. Now, especially by Biden's standards, this is extremely unusual. It's rare enough for Biden to give a press conference at all. He doesn't often give them, much less an unscheduled one, much less one in the evening. Now, we know that usually he's in bed by 6 o'clock. And on top of that, Biden's handlers apparently sent him out to the podium without a list of pre-approved journalists to call on, which again, almost never happens. So Grandpa Joe was left to fend entirely for himself. And naturally, the press conference went pretty much exactly as you would expect it would, or maybe somehow even worse. In fact, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Biden delivered the single most catastrophic press conference I can remember from a president in my entire lifetime. At no point did he allay any of the concerns about his competence or fitness for office. When that was supposed to be the whole point of the press conference, was that topic. The whole point of the press conference is the topic of his own mental fitness. And they sent him stumbling out there in the evening with no preparation. So instead of reassuring Americans about the president's mental fitness, it did the opposite. He made it abundantly clear that he needs to be removed from office immediately. And all of this is even more confounding when you consider that, again, given the time of day, the impromptu nature of the press conference, the topic that Biden was out there to discuss, and the fact that questions were not picked ahead of time, it was pretty much guaranteed to be a disaster. And it's a disaster that the White House walked right into, seemingly on purpose, which makes you ask a lot of questions, which we'll get to. But here's how the press conference began. Watch.
In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. Let me tell you something. Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of... Every Memorial Day, we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or if he passed away.
So Biden does not deny that he couldn't remember when his son died, nor does he explain how this topic came up exactly. Of course, if you've listened to Biden talk at any point in the past few years, you can assume that he brought it up unprompted to garner sympathy with the special counsel because that's his usual strategy. But Biden doesn't address any of that. Instead, he just lashes out angrily at the prosecutor. Then he mentions a rosary, but he can't complete the story because he doesn't remember where it's from. So, not exactly a convincing performance, unless the point is to convince us that Biden is a vegetable, which it certainly succeeded in doing that, but it gets worse. Here's the first question Biden took from Fox's Peter Doocy. Watch.
Thank you, and I'll take some questions.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's
How
totally
bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. That's
Do you feel your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Take a look at the things that, tell me what I've done since I became president, because I can't remember. Take a look at what I've done. Someone take a look and repeat to me, because I have no idea. My memory is so bad, I let you speak, he says. That's the President of the United States saying that, which you almost want to give him credit, because that is like a pretty good comeback. It's maybe, like, you want to give him credit for, that was maybe the wittiest thing we've ever heard Biden say. Except that this, again, is actually a symptom of senility, that he has no filter. Like, that's not something that you say out loud. You could tell after he doesn't even play it off like he meant to say it, because he says, your memory's so bad, I'll let you speak. And then he kind of pauses, because it's clear he didn't mean to say that out loud. So even that one thing you want to give him credit for, you can't. He says he's just a well-meaning elderly man who knows what the hell he's doing. And if you ask him about the fact that he can't remember when his son died or when he was vice president, he'll imply that, you should be prevented from speaking. Now, nobody in the room was really laughing at this, including the journalists from left-wing outlets. So they have apparently received the all clear to ask Biden some hard questions for the first time ever, because corporate media doesn't want him to run again. So that's another thing that made the press conference last night so jarring, is that it was like a hostile environment from the press towards a Democrat president. We never see that. And that's because they were all given the go-ahead by their puppet masters to actually embarrass this guy, because they want him out. We're experiencing a lot of global instability as we plunge into the new year. North Korea is testing missiles. Iran is growing increasingly aggressive. And oh, by the way, we have a presidential election coming up in November. So how do you protect your family in the midst of all this chaos? A great place to start is by protecting your savings. It's not too late to invest in gold with Birch Gold Group today. Unlike many other investments, gold can act as a safe haven investment during turbulent times by providing a hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty. Birch Gold will help you convert your existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, and it will cost you nothing out of pocket. While diversification does not eliminate risk entirely, Birch Gold's experts can help you manage and reduce, providing a more resilient foundation for your financial well-being. I urge you to talk to one of their trusted experts today. All you got to do, though, is text Walsh to 989898, and Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, and thousands of happy customers, I encourage you to check out Birch Gold today. They've been the exclusive gold company of the Daily Wire for the past 7 years. We trust them, and you can trust them too. Text Walsh to 989898 to claim your free info kit today. That's Walsh to 989898 to secure your savings now. So, a CNN reporter named MJ Lee pressed him with a simple and straightforward question about his mental capacity, and instead of calmly answering the question, Joe Biden snapped. Again, watch.
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, watch me. Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They express concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer to that question?
Because I'm the most qualified person in this country to be president of the United States and finish the job I started.
Most qualified person to be president. Well, if that's true, then we're just done. We're done as a country, so might as well just wrap it up. Pack it in if that's true. Thankfully, it isn't. CNN reporter wants to know, of course, if Biden is mentally stable. Biden barks at her. And then the CNN reporter suggests that maybe he isn't the best person to be running for office, and he doesn't have a convincing answer to that question either. So we are witnessing the end of Biden's legitimacy, to the extent that he ever had any to begin with. Whatever shreds of it he may have had are now just gone. They're burned in a fiery flame. Even his once reliable allies in the corporate press have turned on him. And you can see why. At one point in this emergency press conference that was supposedly intended to reassure Americans that the president is mentally competent, Biden refers to the president of Egypt as the president of Mexico.
The conduct of the response in the Gaza Strip has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side.
Well, Mexico over there, bordering, it's over there in the midst of all this is Mexico somehow. Now the thing is, Biden does still have some people in the press that are trying to run cover for him, and so they try to claim that it was a slip of the tongue, or he's misspeaking, but that is not a normal mistake to make. Like, why you're talking about Egypt? Why would Mexico come up? So it's not a slip of the tongue. That's just your brain is misfiring in a sort of in a way that reveals some real brain damage that he is obviously suffering, which means that whoever arranged this press conference is either criminally incompetent or they were trying to sabotage Biden's candidacy. Those are really the only two options. This was entirely predictable. Biden essentially confirmed everything the special counsel said. He even called himself an elderly man in the press conference, which, of course, isn't new. We know that he's elderly. But these are not the kinds of things that you should be saying in this situation. Why would you want to put a sound clip out there of you saying, I am an elderly man? Now, as I mentioned earlier, the special counsel investigating Biden's handling of classified documents found that, quote, in his interview with our office, Mr. Biden did not remember when he was vice president, forgetting on the first day of the interview when his term ended, and forgetting on the second day of the interview when his term began. He did not remember even within several years when his son Beau died, and his memory appeared hazy when describing the Afghanistan debate that was once so important to him. Among other things, he mistakenly said he had a real difference of opinion with General Carl Eikenberry, when in fact Eikenberry was an ally whom Mr. Biden cited approvingly in his Thanksgiving memo to President Obama. The memo continues, we have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview with him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observations of him, he is someone for whom many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him by then a former president well into his 80s of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. Now, before I go any further, it needs to be mentioned that the reasoning is completely absurd. The only relevant information for the purposes of bringing a criminal prosecution is Biden's mental state when he committed the alleged crimes. And according to the special counsel, as far back as more than a decade ago, Joe Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified documents with classification markings on them. That includes classified documents from his time in the Senate several decades ago. The documents were in his, quote, garage, offices, and basement den in both Virginia and Delaware. Again, Biden retained these documents many years ago. There's no suggestion that he had Alzheimer's or amnesia back then. So if that's a crime, he should be prosecuted for it. If he's not mentally competent to stand trial, that's a defense that his lawyers can raise after charges have been brought. It's not the special counsel's job to lay off on the charges because he's elderly now. It's not their job to say, well, probably the jury will be sympathetic to him, so we're not going to bring charges. How often do you hear that from a prosecutor? We're not going to bring these charges because we figured ahead of time that the jury will find him sympathetic. What? Now, this is especially absurd given that the DOJ is going after Donald Trump for allegedly storing classified documents, even though Donald Trump, as president, had the authority to declassify whatever he wanted. Not to mention, if being elderly is a defense, well, then Trump is elderly too and is only a few years younger. Now, but at this point, no one is surprised by the fact that the DOJ is prosecuting Trump for a crime while giving Biden a pass for committing the exact same crime. That was always a given. What is surprising, again, is why Joe Biden's handlers let him take questions last night under these circumstances. It's almost like they were setting him up for disaster. That's especially true given the contrast. Like, of all nights to do this, last night was the worst possible night. Not that there could be a good night. Because of the contrast between Biden's remarks and the interview last night between Tucker Carlson and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, Putin spoke with Tucker Carlson for 2 hours, uninterrupted. In response to a question about why Russia invaded Ukraine, Putin recounted the history of his country in exacting, excruciating detail going back centuries. It was quite dry, but it was, informative and it was dense. And Putin was clearly lucid and clear thinking. He was more than capable of sitting for a lengthy adversarial interview with a journalist from a foreign country. That's remarkable, given the fact that, for the past year, the media has told us that Putin is sick and frail and senile and like dying of cancer and he's in hiding. That's obviously not the case. But most of that is the case with our president. We're told that Biden isn't competent enough to be prosecuted, but is competent enough to have the most important job in the world for another 5 years. He's immune from committing crimes due to his lack of mental capacity, but he can have nuclear codes, apparently. It's laughable. And everybody knows it. They know that Biden has lost his mind. And now even the DOJ has confirmed it. It is a full-blown constitutional crisis if he stays in office. That's what we're facing. We have a president that everybody knows now is senile. Now, of course, the double-edged sword is that it's much better politically for Trump if Biden stays in. Like swapping Biden out for somebody younger who can speak in coherent sentences would make things more challenging for Trump. But, politics are really a secondary concern at this point. The truth is that we simply cannot have a president who is not only senile, but is known to the world and to our adversaries to be senile. You just can't have it. It's a danger to everybody in this country. He needs to resign. And if he won't resign, he needs to be removed from office. He could be a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory who lives out the remainder of his days off in obscurity somewhere, far away from the levers of power. The rest of us, people who intend to live in this country long after Biden is gone, which one way or another he'll be gone pretty soon, we simply cannot tolerate having somebody like this in the White House any longer. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.